Hello everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and role-playing, tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. For this video, I'll be reviewing the DM's Guild Dungeon Supplemental Compilation, Drop-In Dungeons Tier 1, designed by Beatriz T for Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shout out to my platinum patrons Andrew and Brian, and gold patron RPG Papercrafts. Thank you so much for your support. Let us check out Drop-In Dungeons. So I have certainly some experience with Drop-In Dungeons, which is basically one-shot dungeons. It's a single map, and they're designed to slot into an existing campaign, and I generally like that concept a lot. I am always looking for extra content to throw in to different areas, and as long as the theme and the setting will fit, then I think there's a lot to add just from adding a little dungeon. And obviously this works well if your group likes dungeon crawls, if that's something that they're into, and I feel like, a lot of D&D groups are into that, then there is a lot of people want that kind of thing. I want that kind of thing for sure. So I'm into this concept, and this one provides 5 low level, which is tier 1 is exactly what it says on the tin, levels 1 through 4. And I'm glad it doesn't do the usual cellars in a rats in a cellar. Cellars in a rat would be a pretty fantastic idea for a dungeon crawl, actually. That would be a great twist. It doesn't do the rats in the cellar or the goblins in a cave. It does have caves and temples. It has one kind of unique dungeon that I like the idea of, although it was actually a little more mundane and normal than I expected. And also, I'm not a fan of the art style for the maps. I just at the time of this review, I just reviewed the big Waterdeep Dragon Heist latest adventure from Wizards of the Coast, and I very much bemoaned and complained about the maps there because it's that just black ink, bare bones on graph paper kind of look, and especially for a big $50 product like that, I was not a fan of. For this, something like this, which I think is like $1 in the DM's Guild, I'm way more lenient and accepting of, but still, in terms of being able to drop in a map, the main reason I like the drop-in maps is because I can literally take that and put it into something like Roll20 and immediately use that as a battle map. You don't have to draw dynamic lighting and whatnot, but I can use it right away. And this, I can't do that here, which is a big bummer. But let's go ahead and go over the drop-in dungeons tier 1. So the 5 dungeons that it gives you are an old warehouse at level 1, which is a bunch of kenku in a warehouse, which, cool, that's not something you see at level 1 very often, obviously. And the nice thing is that it mentions recommends where you would put these different dungeons, where you would actually slot them in. You can pretty much tell, okay, you'd put a cave in a forest, that kind of thing. Obviously, a warehouse goes in a city. But it's a neat idea. There's, we'll go ahead and look at that one. And you can see here's the map style that it uses, which I don't like this at all. Obviously, it gets, you need a map. If you're going to do, if your entire thing is maps, then you need a map. But this is the most bare bones, threadbare map you could possibly do. It's literally just, boxes or circles in some of the cave areas with notations about what is happening there. And there's a lot happening here. There's, spider webs, and there's giant wolf spiders in a room, there's kenku, there's a trapped door with caged cockatrice. What do you call 2 cockatrices? Cockatrice? I don't know. But there's a pair of them. Which it mentions, depending on your level of generosity, if some members of the party got turned to stone, feel free to include potions that remove petrification in the treasure hoard. No shit, balance is tough, and maybe I'm just a nice DM, but I would never throw petrifying creatures at level 1 players, let alone without some way to remove petrification. That's just awful. Especially if you're playing with people that don't know what that kind of creature can do. But that's kind of a neat idea. These animals are caged, and if you fuck with the door, if you miss the lockpicking or whatever, then it swings open. The boss room is kind of weird in this one. It's just a single kenku, from what I understand, which is actually the least difficult room of this dungeon. which feels weird. But otherwise, the design is fine. There's plenty of like traps and locked doors and treasures and things to find in there for level 1. And again, I think a warehouse is fun. This map, I don't want to say sucks, but I can't use this map. Like I would have to redo this map to where my players and I can actually play on it as a battle map. And not every group is like that. Some are more theater of the mind, or some maybe would like this kind of style where it's like, okay, we'll fill in the blanks with these descriptions, and the descriptions are fine. Although I wish there were the actual, and the weird thing is it does this thing with the square text, but that's not the stuff that you read. It's just kind of more explanation. So it's missing the actual like descriptive text. Not missing, but it'd be nice to have that in there. But it's fine. I would have to if I was actually going to run this dungeon, I would have to completely remake this map. I use Roll20 in Roll20, so that's kind of puts a damper on how I feel about all these dungeons. Ruined Sanctum is a like crumbling temple, and it's full of the blights, the plants. What are they called? Vine blights, twig blights, needle blights. Basically, just has one big room here in 3, which just has a shit ton of little creatures, which is kind of nice because I feel like a lot of dungeons tend to be DMs want to use like the strongest possible monsters and whatever. But I think using hordes of little guys, there's definitely something there. And again, at these low levels, players don't have access to fireball and like the big. We have hordes of low levels, like that's where the wizard and sorcerer shine because they have all those big AoE explosive spells. And here, they don't quite have that. You've got your magic missile, you've got your sleep, and maybe a burning hands would come in very handy here. But I like the idea that, and it's a nice description. There's like a tree with like a skeleton, sitting amongst the tree exposed surface roots. So there's all like nature is literally like just killing things in this room. So again, kind of neat. And again, the design is all fine. It's just I wish this were an actual map and not just the bare bones kind of notes for a DM. Which all of these, it does come with a separate zip file of the maps without the numbers on there. So obviously you could use this as a player's map. This is the ones included in the adventure. Obviously have the numbers for the DM, but they're not. They're just this style still. The next one is the Lunar Dove. This is the one that I thought was the most interesting and different. It is a brothel, which is a friggin' awesome idea for a dungeon. I kind of expected it to go in like a dark direction, like some kind of vampire thing or demon thing or just something going on here. That even maybe is too tropey that I'm coming up with. But honestly, there's nothing really. It's pretty mundane, which maybe that's the shock, is that it is just a brothel with like a thug running things. He kind of spies on there's secret door, which the other weird thing is there's supposed to be secret doors, but these are just labeled as actual doors on the map. If you're going to put a secret door on here, you probably need to like have it look like a wall and then write like a little S on there or something, because otherwise this just looks like a door. But otherwise it's literally just, nobles visit, and then there's like a lounge area, and then there's just a thug in here. I did like that there's the owner, which nobody has names either, it's just a thug. Has a pair of panthers lounging unrestrained upon their own silk pillows. I like that. That's great. That feels very thematic. So I thought this was just interesting because I've never seen like a little mini brothel used as a drop-in location. It's, I don't want to say squandered opportunity. There's some neat stuff happening, but it's not quite as fancy as I expected. And again, this is a level 3. Although level 3, I feel like you can start doing some cool stuff with level 3. The next two are both for level 4. This is a cave. I guess it's the only cave, isn't it? And there was the warehouse, and then the sanctum. Yeah, so this is the only cave one. Obviously slot into a forest, and it's got a druid who heals creatures. This first area has a bunch of will-o-wisps that try to lead you into a tar pit in the middle of the room, which is very cool. And then the second one has a healing lake with water weirds. So they battle the PCs, obviously, but the healing lake can heal them if they stand in it. And then there's a druid with, I think it's a table of different creatures that the druid can have with them. And one thing it's missing, and it's something that I've come to expect because I've looked at stuff like the Book of Layers from Kobold Press and their Prepared and Prepared 2, is that they have more story with their drop-in dungeons, which, obviously as a DM you can choose to have or not, or insert your own, but there's some kind of hook. There's a reason for going to this dungeon, and that's really all that I was looking for. Is just give me a simple, even if it's a few sentences, like a reason for the players to come in here. And yeah, a drop-in dungeon would make it like, okay, well, you've already got a reason to get to somewhere, so here's your dungeon. But I think that's not asking for too much. Is like, well, give me a reason for the, maybe somebody just mentions there's this healing lake in this cave somewhere, and you can get some of it. You can fill your water skins and have those kind of healing properties. Give the players a hook for getting to all these dungeons, whatever that may be. If there's treasure in some, the Kenku stole something from somebody, you have to go in there and take it back. Or this brothel, you need to get a secret out of somebody. Or give a suggestion of a couple hooks that the players can use. There's nothing like that here. There's no story whatsoever. These are just dungeons. The closest one to a story is this one, the final dungeon, which is also level 4, the Temple to Shotar, which I don't know if this is a real Forgotten Realms deity or not. If it's not, it's decently fleshed out, because it's this lawful evil cult. It's just full of cultists. There is a banshee at the beginning, which actually has a bit of a little backstory, although I don't think she has a name. But she was a ranking member of this cult, and the players can actually choose to kind of try to go in stealthily. There's like a changing room with they can catch the cultists like in mid disrobement, which is kind of funny. Otherwise, it's just kind of a pretty standard cultist room. They're sacrificing people. They're up to no good. These are all, pretty generic, but that's kind of the point. It's tier 1. They're drop-in dungeons. Nothing is too fancy or crazy, and that was almost one of the problems I had with some of the fancier drop-in dungeons. With stuff like Prepared 2, is that they get too crazy. They're like, okay, this one takes place in a tundra with a crack in the world, and there's a void dragon in there. And I'm like, that's not, maybe for like a one-shot or something, but that's kind of hard to just insert into any campaign. Whereas these, it's caves, it's temples, it's stuff that you can easily put in anywhere else. So that is an advantage here. But they're not terribly memorable. It's all standard monster manual stuff with some dungeon, DMG loot. And with the exception of the brothel, I think the brothel is an interesting one. And I'm not a fan of this actual art style ever. It's just not for me. Some people, judging by the comments on my Waterdeep Dragon Heist review, some people definitely do enjoy this style. So if that's, if you do, then that won't be a problem for you, in which case this one would be a lot better. For me personally, this would not work for me. Not to say I wouldn't like to use any of these dungeons, but it would require that much more work. I would have to literally physically build out these dungeons through something like Roll20 to be able to actually play on it. So, and that's pretty much it. It's simple, 12 pages, just those 5 dungeons without any really story stuff there. So pretty simple. Does what it says on the tin, I guess, which is going to be my first pro when I do my pros and cons. That it gives you 5 fairly generic dungeons designed to drop into existing campaigns. That sounds like a summary, but it is a pro. That's what it's designed to do, and they are generic dungeons, which is weird because usually that would be a con, but here I think that's the strength, is that you can put these in different places. The warehouse can be anywhere in a city or even a town. The sanctum, the cave, and even the temple, they could be either in, they could be in a rural setting or wherever else, and the brothel probably in a city also, but, they're more open to be able to be used in different areas. Pro, there's a range of level dungeons provided throughout the tier 1, so you've got level 1, level 2, level 3, and 2 level 4s, and they all seem to be fairly decently balanced. There's nothing too crazy in terms of the traps or the monsters used, so they're all fairly solidly low level. And Pro, I think a brothel is a really neat and unique idea for a dungeon in the Lunar Dove. It's not quite as exciting as I was picturing. It is just a brothel with humans there. And again, because it lacks the story stuff, you really have to fill in all the blanks as a DM. But in terms of, I'm glad it's not all just caves and temples, although it is mostly caves and temples. Cons, the maps are black lines on graph paper, which is not a style I like, nor can use on something like Roll20. So that is a big con for me personally. Obviously, your mileage may vary depending on how you feel about the style and whether your group uses more theater of the mind or uses like tactical battle maps, that kind of thing. For me, I'm more on the latter. And con, there are a few typos and grammatical errors throughout some entries. I'm not going to sit here and nitpick every single one. And normally, if I find like one typo or something, I'm not going to call that out or anything like that. I'm a writer. I know, it's there probably will be a typo somewhere in my written review of this adventure even. But if I'm seeing a couple, if there's two or three, or there's some weirdness going on with some sentences, then I'm going to have to call that out, because if you're selling this on the DM's Guild, you've got to lock that stuff up. Like that needs to be step one, is making sure it's concise and well written and is free of errors. So final verdict for Drop-In Dungeons Tier 1 provides a cheap and easy way to add some low-level dungeons to our campaign, though the actual map art is disappointingly bare. Thank you everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. You can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.